In the aftermath of a devastating storm, a school bus crashes into a rising river, trapping 10-year-old Ella and her classmates. Among the rescuers is Ella's father, Tom, who faces an impossible decision. Save his daughter or Liam, the son of his late best friend to whom he made a sacred promise. As the bus begins to sink, the clock ticks down, and Tom is forced to confront a choice that could shatter his soul. The rain came down in sheets, a relentless drumbeat against the earth. Visibility was a cruel joke, reduced to a gray blur as the storm gained strength. The river, swollen from days of unrelenting downpour, roared like a caged beast. It licked hungrily at the edges of the narrow, twisting road where a yellow school bus had skidded to a precarious stop, its rear half jutting over the churning waters. Inside the bus, chaos reigned. Children's cries pierced the deafening rain. 10-year-old Ella clutched her small hands around the cold metal of a seat's armrest, her knuckles white. Her dark curls clung to her face, damp with tears and rainwater. Beside her, her friend Liam stared at her with wide, fearful eyes, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "Stay calm! Hold on tight!" yelled the bus driver, his voice cracking under the weight of his own fear. The vehicle groaned ominously, shifting slightly as the current lapped higher, threatening to drag it down. Miles away, Tom's pager buzzed violently. A volunteer with the local search and rescue team, he was no stranger to emergencies, but the message hit him like a fist. School bus crash. Rising river. Multiple children trapped. Tom's chest tightened as he pictured Ella's face. He didn't wait for details. He grabbed his gear and bolted for his truck, his boots slapping against the muddy ground of the station. The drive to the scene was a blur of twisting roads and a gnawing pit of dread. The windshield wipers thrashed uselessly against the deluge, but Tom kept his foot steady on the gas. He thought of Ella's laugh, clear and bright like church bells on a quiet morning. A laugh he couldn't lose. When he arrived, the sight stole his breath. Emergency responders milled around, shouts and commands barely audible over the cacophony of nature's wrath. The bus teetered dangerously, its yellow frame illuminated by the red and blue strobes of patrol cars. A hastily strung rope tethered it to a nearby tree, the only thing keeping it from plunging into the river's maw. Tom didn't wait for an order. He waded through the throng toward the rescue coordinator. "Where's my daughter?" His voice was raw, the question sharp enough to cut through the storm. The coordinator hesitated, her face grim. "Ella's in the bus, near the back, but there's more. We've got a boy on the other side, separated from her. Liam, I think." Tom's stomach churned. Liam. The name was a bullet to the heart. His best friend, Danny, had died 3 years ago in an accident that left Tom crippled with guilt. Danny's last request, whispered on a hospital bed, "Take care of my boy. You have to hurry," the coordinator continued. "The water's rising faster than we can control." Tom nodded, his jaw tightening as he grabbed a harness. Save Ella. Save Liam. How can I choose? Inside the bus, the children huddled in clusters, their breaths clouding the air. Water seeped in through the cracks, pooling at their feet. Ella looked at Liam, her voice a trembling whisper. "They'll come for us, right?" Liam didn't answer. He stared at the water rising beneath them, his small frame trembling. Outside, Tom approached the bus with 2 other rescuers. The rope tethering it was straining against the pressure. One rescuer muttered, "We don't have much time." Tom's gaze darted to the children pressed against the windows, their faces pale with terror. His heart clenched as his eyes locked onto Ella's. Relief flashed across her face as she saw him, but it was fleeting, drowned out by the terror of their situation. Tom climbed onto the bus, the cold metal slicked beneath his hand. The structure groaned under his weight, a warning that it wouldn't hold much longer. Inside, he shouted above the storm, "We're getting you out, one at a time!" The rescuers moved quickly, ushering the nearest children toward the emergency exit. Each child released was a moment of triumph, but the knot in Tom's chest only tightened. Ella and Liam remained, their fragile figures huddled at opposite ends of the bus. "Dad!" Ella cried, her voice breaking. Tom's stomach twisted as he moved toward her. But before he could reach her, a sudden jolt rocked the bus, sending him sprawling. The tether had snapped, The bus shifted violently, half submerged now. Water surged through the aisle as the rescuers shouted for Tom to retreat, but he couldn't move. His gaze darted between Ella and Liam, both staring at him with desperate, pleading eyes. In that moment, time slowed. The roar of the storm faded, leaving only the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He saw Ella, her face streaked with tears, her lips forming the word, "Daddy." He saw Liam, pale and shaking, clutching the seat for dear life. Save Ella. Save Liam. Choose. The weight of Danny's promise pressed on his shoulders, but the love for his daughter burned hotter than the storm around him. Tom's breath caught in his throat as he realized the impossible choice before him. "I'm coming!" he shouted, the words echoing hollowly in his ears. But to whom? The rain showed no mercy. Each drop hammered down like a relentless drumbeat, the river swelling further, hungry and unforgiving. The tether had snapped entirely now, and the school bus tilted more ominously, as if preparing to surrender to the water's pull. Inside, screams of terror escalated into a deafening chorus. Tom fought to steady himself as water surged up to his knees. The bus swayed beneath him, creaking like a wounded animal. His hands gripped the edge of a seat for balance, the metal biting cold against his skin. "Ella! Liam!" His voice cut through the storm, raw and desperate. "Dad, I'm here!" Ella cried out from the back, her small hand rising above the churning water pooling around her legs. She tried to climb onto the seat for safety, her soaked clothes clinging to her tiny frame. On the opposite end, Liam's pale face was streaked with tears, his breaths coming in shallow gasps. "Tom!" His voice cracked, the unspoken plea for help twisting like a knife in Tom's chest. The seconds ticked away with ruthless indifference. The other rescuers called to him from outside, their voices muffled by the storm. "Tom, we have to evacuate now! It's too dangerous!" Too dangerous. The words rang hollow. Everything about this moment was dangerous. But abandoning either child wasn't an option. Not yet. Tom's mind raced. Every second a cruel thief stealing away his options. Ella clung to the back of the bus and Liam was wedged near the front, separated by a rising torrent. The water now lapped at their knees, the frigid current threatening to pull them under if the bus tilted further. "Liam, hold on tight!" Tom shouted, his voice trembling with an emotion he couldn't name. He pushed his body through the freezing water toward Ella. Every step forward felt like a battle against an invisible hand, dragging him back. "Dad, I'm scared!" Ella sobbed, her voice breaking. She tried to steady herself, but the seat slipped beneath her trembling legs. Her tear-filled eyes locked onto Tom's, filled with trust that he wasn't sure he deserved. "I'm coming, sweetheart. Stay where you are." His voice was calm, steady, an anchor in the storm, but his insides churned like the river itself. Just as Tom reached Ella's side, the bus lurched again. A horrifying screech filled the air as metal protested against the strain. The water surged higher, crashing over the seats. Tom clutched Ella to his chest, shielding her from the worst of the flood. "Daddy!" Her whisper barely reached him over the chaos. "I've got you," he murmured, though his heart was splitting in two. He kissed the top of her head, his lips trembling against her damp curls. "I'll never let anything happen to you." But Liam's voice shattered the fragile moment. "Tom, please!" His words were choked, but the fear in them was unmistakable. Tom looked over his shoulder. Liam's small frame was trembling, his arms wrapped around the seat as if it were the only thing tethering him to life. Memories of Danny surged forward with cruel clarity, his best friend's hand gripping his as he whispered his dying wish. "Take care of him, Tom. Promise me you'll take care of my boy." The guilt roared louder than the storm. How could he choose? How could he break a vow so sacred and let Liam slip into the abyss? But how could he sacrifice Ella, his daughter, his light, the reason his heart still beat? A rescuer's voice broke through his torment. "Tom, we're running out of time. The bus is going to collapse." Tom's jaw tightened as he glanced back at Ella. Her brown eyes, wide and trusting, met his. She clung to him, her small hands gripping his shoulders. "Daddy, don't leave me!" His knees buckled under the weight of her words, but he set her gently on the seat above the waterline. I'll be right back, I promise." His voice was steady, but inside he was unraveling. "Dad, no!" Ella's cry rose in panic, but he had already turned toward Liam. The boy needed him, and Tom's heart screamed with the impossible cruelty of it all. The journey to Liam felt endless, the rising water clawing at his legs with icy tendrils. "Hold on, Liam!" he yelled, his voice nearly drowned out by the storm. When he reached Liam, the boy's tear-streaked face tilted up toward him. "I'm scared," Liam whispered, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "I know, buddy. I'm here now," Tom said, pulling the harness from his back. He fastened it around Liam with shaking hands, securing the boy with the kind of care Danny would have expected from him. But as he worked, the bus groaned again, the sound sharper, more final. A fresh wave of water surged in, pushing Tom backward and forcing him to grab the seat for stability. The rescuers outside shouted frantically, "The bus is breaking apart! Tom, get out now!" Tom's gaze darted back to Ella. She was crying, her small figure shivering on the seat. The water had reached her waist and her terrified sobs pierced his soul. He had only moments left, time fractured, every second stretching unbearably as Tom's decision loomed larger. His hands gripped Liam's harness and he began pulling the boy toward the exit. The boy's face buried against his chest, his small arms clutching him tightly. But halfway to safety, Ella's cry broke through. "Dad, don't leave me!" Tom froze, torn in two, his vision blurred with tears as the storm raged on, merciless and uncaring. The decision loomed. One child could be saved now, only one. The storm seemed to grow louder, as if mocking Tom's hesitation. The bus groaned beneath him, water rushing in with a roar that drowned out the cries of the children. His hands trembled as he held Liam close, his gaze darting to Ella, who was now barely visible above the rising tide. "Tom, you've got seconds before it's gone!" A rescuer shouted from outside, their voice muffled by the downpour. Tom's breath hitched, and the world around him blurred. How do you choose? How do you weigh the life of your own child against a promise that feels carved into your soul? Ella's voice cut through the noise, desperate and high-pitched. "Daddy, don't leave me! Please!" Tom's legs felt like lead, rooted in the freezing water. His heart thundered in his chest as he looked back at Liam, his late best friend's son, pale and shivering in his arms. Danny's voice echoed in his memory, a ghostly whisper. "Promise me, Tom, you'll look after my boy." "Tom, move!" Another shout came, sharper this time. The rescuers were scrambling to position themselves downstream, ready to pull him, or whoever he managed to save, from the raging waters. He turned his focus back to Liam, tightening his grip on the boy. The harness was secure. He could carry him to the opening in seconds, get him to safety, but at what cost? The bus jolted violently. A scream rose from the children still inside. Tom's head whipped around just in time to see Ella's small body slip from her perch and into the water. She surfaced moments later, thrashing, her face pale with terror. "Ella!" The name tore from his throat, primal and raw. Her hands clawed at the seats as she tried to steady herself, but the current was relentless, pulling her closer to the far end of the bus. Tom's legs moved before his mind caught up, his instincts overriding the chaos in his heart. He shoved Liam into the rescuer's waiting arms at the bus's rear exit. "Take him!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. The man nodded and pulled the boy out with practiced efficiency, disappearing into the storm. Tom turned back toward Ella. The water had risen to his chest now, the icy current threatening to pull him under with each step. "Ella, grab onto something!" he yelled, fighting the river's pull with every ounce of strength he had left. "Daddy!" Her cry broke again, and she reached for him, her small hands flailing. The sight shattered him. His daughter, so tiny and fragile, struggling to survive in a moment that no child should ever endure. He reached her in 3 agonizing steps, scooping her into his arms as the bus groaned again, louder, more final. The tether that had snapped earlier had left it defenseless against the river's might, and now it was giving up the fight. Tom held Ella tightly, her cold, trembling body pressed against his. "I've got you, baby," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I've got you." As he turned toward the exit, A terrible sound tore through the air. The bus lurched violently, and Tom's footing gave way. The current yanked at them with renewed fury, pulling them toward the submerged front of the vehicle. Outside, rescuers shouted frantically, their ropes straining against the pull of the river. "Tom, get out, now!" The bus tilted further and the icy water crashed over Tom's head. He surfaced with a gasp, holding Ella above the waterline as best he could. Her arms clung to his neck, her sobs muffled against his shoulder. "Daddy, don't let go," she begged, her voice a trembling whisper. "Never," Tom choked out. His legs burned with effort as he fought against the current, forcing his body toward the exit. Each step felt impossible, as if the river itself had come alive to claim them. When he finally reached the opening, 2 rescuers leaned in, their arms outstretched. Tom pushed Ella toward them, his muscles screaming in protest. "Take her!" he yelled, his voice breaking. They pulled her out, her small figure disappearing into the safety of their arms. Relief coursed through him, but it was fleeting. The bus groaned again and the front dipped sharply. Tom's body was dragged backward, his arms flailing for something, anything to grab onto, the rope. He lunged for the tether still secured to the far edge of the bus, his fingers brushing it just as the vehicle tilted again. The world spun, water crashing over him. He gripped the rope with everything he had, gasping for air as the river tried to swallow him whole. "Tom, hold on!" The rescuers' voices were faint now, their figures blurred by the relentless rain. His muscles burned, his lungs screamed for oxygen, but he didn't let go. Inch by inch, they pulled him from the sinking wreckage, the rope cutting into his hands. When he finally broke free, the bus vanished beneath the surface, claimed by the raging river. Tom collapsed on the muddy bank, coughing up water, his chest heaving. Strong hands pulled him upright, voices surrounding him, but he barely heard them. His eyes scanned frantically until they landed on Ella. She was wrapped in a blanket, her tear-streaked face pressed against a rescuer's shoulder. When she saw him, she broke free, running toward him with shaky legs. "Daddy!" He caught her, pulling her into his arms. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice cracking as he held her tightly. "I'm here." But even as relief washed over him, another thought pierced his heart. Liam, was he safe? Tom's head snapped toward the rescuers. "The boy, Liam, where is he?" One of the men nodded toward a nearby ambulance. "He's okay. We got him to safety." "Liam," Tom called softly. The boy looked up, his tear-streaked face a mixture of relief and uncertainty. He stood as Tom reached him, his small hands fidgeting at his sides. "You okay, buddy?" Tom asked, crouching down so he was eye level with Liam. The boy nodded but said nothing. His gaze flickered to Ella, who was watching him with cautious curiosity. Tom swallowed hard, his throat thick with unspoken words. "You were so brave today. Your dad..." His voice cracked, and he paused, steadying himself. "Your dad would be so proud of you." Liam's lip quivered, and he blinked rapidly to hold back tears. Tom's breath hitched. He reached out, resting a hand on Liam's shoulder. "I promised your dad I'd take care of you, and I meant it. But Liam, you're the one who held on. You fought. That's why you're here." The boy nodded slowly, but the sadness lingered in his eyes, a quiet ache that spoke louder than word. His gaze darted to the crowd of parents embracing their children, but no one was there for him. Tom's chest tightened, the weight of the boy's loneliness pressing against his own grief. Without hesitation, he placed a gentle hand on Liam's shoulder and said softly, "You're coming home with us tonight, kiddo." That night, the fire crackled softly in the living room of Tom's small house. Ella sat curled up on the couch, a blanket draped over her shoulders. Liam sat beside her, clutching a steaming mug of cocoa that Tom had hastily prepared. The 2 children were quiet, their faces lit by the flickering glow of the fire. Ella looked over at Liam, his small frame bathed in the flickering glow of the fire, his eyes distant as they stared into the flames. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as she turned back to her father. "Daddy, is Liam gonna stay with us?" The question hit him like a punch to the gut. He'd thought of Danny's boy as his responsibility for years, but today had changed everything. The connection they'd forged in that bus in the face of death was something deeper now. Tom stood and walked to the couch, sitting beside Liam. The boy didn't look up, but his small frame leaned instinctively toward him. "Liam," Tom began gently, "you're welcome to stay here for as long as you want. This can be your home, too." Liam looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. "You mean, live here?" Tom nodded. "Your dad was my best friend. He'd want you to have a family, a place where you feel safe. I'll do my best to give you that." Tears welled in Liam's eyes, and he blinked them away furiously. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. Tom placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, squeezing gently. "You don't have to thank me. We're family now." If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to HeroKind Stories and leave a comment below. What would you have done in Tom's place? Share your thoughts. We'd love to hear them.